If you were going to build a custom home from scratch, you wouldn't just, drive to a lumber yard.
Right, definitely not.
Yeah, you wouldn't buy a random assortment of 2x4s and just start blindly nailing boards together in the middle of some empty dirt lot.
No, I mean, that would be a disaster. You'd need a blueprint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would demand a blueprint. You would need to know the exact load-bearing capacity of the soil, the precise routing of the plumbing.
The local zoning laws, the roof trusses, all of it.
Right. You would plan the architecture before you ever picked up a single hammer. Yet, when it comes to the single most critical structural project of our entire lives, which is our financial future, so many of us are just standing out in that empty field,
Just swinging a hammer in the dark.
wildly swinging it. Yeah. And we're just hoping a mansion somehow, spontaneously generates out of thin air.
And that cognitive dissonance is staggering when you actually stop and analyze it. We treat wealth generation like it's just a happy accident.
Yeah, like it's a byproduct of just working really hard and hoping for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rather than treating it as the rigorous structural engineering project that it actually is.
Yeah.
I mean, we obsess over the aesthetics of the finished house.
The idea of just being wealthy.
Right, the idea of the wealth. But we completely shy away from the underlying, often really tedious architecture required to lay the foundation.
To build the walls, keep the roof from caving in during a storm.
Yes, all the unglamorous work.
Which is exactly the architectural tension we are tearing apart today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive on the Generational Wealth Project.
It's great to be here for this one.
It is a massive one. And real quick, if you are joining us today, please take a second right now to like and subscribe.
It really makes a huge difference.
It really does help the project grow, and it ensures we can keep bringing you these deep dives into the absolute mechanics of financial independence. So our mission today is to hand you that blueprint.
A literal roadmap.
Exactly. We are unpacking 12 specific architectural habits, and we aren't talking about generic advice here. This is a comprehensive mathematical roadmap.
Designed to move you from swinging that hammer in the dark to executing a master plan for true financial freedom.
But before we get into the mechanics of that roadmap, I think we really need to mathematically define financial freedom. Because that phrase, it's been entirely hijacked by social media.
Oh, completely hijacked. It's become this meaningless buzzword attached to, pictures of rented sports cars.
Rented being the key word there.
Right, rented cars and private jets. But mathematically speaking, financial freedom is an absolute calculable threshold.
It's a real number.
It is. It means accumulating enough invested capital and liquid cash that the passive yield from those assets entirely covers the burn rate of the lifestyle you want for yourself and your family.
So it's the exact point where work just becomes optional.
Exactly. It's when that crushing, low-grade anxiety of trading your time for survival simply evaporates.
It is the ultimate removal of friction from your life. Now, to understand this blueprint, we aren't going to just read down a dry numbered list of 12 habits like some audio textbook.
No, nobody wants to listen to that.
Right. We are going to segment these concepts logically into 4 distinct phases of construction. First, we'll tackle the vision and architecture, which is how you draw the map and fund the project.
Setting the foundation.
Then second, we build the defensive strategy, patching the holes in the hull and building a moat against disaster. Third, we launch the offensive strategy, where the real multiplication of wealth happens.
That's the fun part.
It is. And finally, we look at the holistic ecosystem, the macro environment, the maintenance of your physical assets, and the literal human body required to enjoy all of this. Okay, let's unpack this.
I love that structural approach because, these habits do not exist in a vacuum.
Right, they're entirely symbiotic.
Exactly. Your offensive investing strategy is completely useless if your defensive debt strategy is just hemorrhaging capital every month.
And none of the math worked if the initial architecture is flawed from day one. So let's lay that foundation. The very first pillar, the first element of this architecture, is establishing the vision.
Habit number 1.
Right. Which requires setting incredibly clear, ruthlessly specific financial goals. But what really strikes me in this deep dive is the specific methodology required here.
You're talking about the counting backward strategy.
Yes, counting backward. The premise is that you have to determine your ideal long-term lifestyle, calculate the exact dollar amount needed to sustain it, and then target the age you want to achieve it.
And then you reverse engineer financial mileposts to hit at age 50, 40, 30, and so on.
Right. You are essentially standing at the finish line and walking backward to the starting block.
The psychology behind counting backward is fascinating, really. It's rooted in a concept called future self-continuity.
Future self-continuity.
Yeah, human beings are notoriously terrible at conceptualizing their future selves. Neurologically speaking, when you think about yourself 30 years from now, your brain often processes that person as a complete stranger.
Wait, really? A stranger?
Yes, literally like someone you don't even know. That is why it is so easy to blow $1,000 on a vacation today instead of investing it for retirement.
Because you are essentially choosing yourself over this abstract stranger in the future.
Precisely. By counting backward, you force a connection.
Yeah.
You are taking an abstract concept like, I want to retire comfortably, and translating it into a rigid, non-negotiable mathematical reality for your current self.
I do have to push back on this a little bit, though.
Sure, go ahead.
I understand the psychology, but the application of it just feels impossible. I mean, I am in my 30s. I have no earthly idea if the 65-year-old version of me wants to live in a cabin in the woods, a high-rise in the city, or, like, travel in an RV.
Which is totally fair.
So how do you accurately calculate a dollar amount for a future lifestyle when the person who will be living that lifestyle doesn't even exist yet? It feels like trying to pack a suitcase without knowing if you're going to Antarctica or the Sahara.
That is a completely valid friction point. It
Ah.
really is.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of the exercise.
Okay, how so?
Well, the goal of counting backward isn't to predict your exact desires with psychic accuracy. The goal is simply to give your current capital a job.
Giving it a jog.
Right. Unassigned capital is essentially cash drag. It just gets absorbed by the friction of everyday life.
Oh, I see. So if you don't assign a dollar to your future independence, it just vanishes.
It vanishes into premium streaming services, expensive dinners, random Amazon purchases, and lifestyle inflation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You might not know if you want the cabin or the condo, but you know you will need housing. You know you will need food. You know you will need health care.
So you calculate a baseline independent of the specific aesthetics of the life.
Exactly. If you know you need, say, $2 million to generate an $80,000 annual yield, you can calculate that you need $500,000 by age 40.
It forces you to hit the milepost.
Yes. If you change your mind about the destination later, that's completely fine. You still have the accumulated capital to fund whatever detour you want to take.
That actually totally reframes how I look at it. The goal isn't the cabin in the woods. The goal is the optionality.
Optionality is the perfect word for it.
And to build that optionality, you need an engine. Which brings us to the second habit, the mechanism of funding the architecture, which is the budget.
The dreaded budget.
Right. Everyone hates that word. Now, our listeners are well informed.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to sit here and define that a mortgage is a need and a fancy iced latte is a want.
No, we can skip the basics.
We all know the basics of the 50-30-20 rule. 50% to needs, 30 to wants, 20 to wealth building. But I really want to talk about where this rule actually breaks down in the real world.
It definitely has its limitations.
Especially for people who are advancing in their careers and increasing their income. Because if someone is making, say, $250,000 a year, and they are rigidly spending 50% of that $125,000 on needs.
Right, they aren't budgeting at that point.
No, they are suffering from massive lifestyle creep.
That is a brilliant observation. And it really highlights the danger of treating ratios as religious texts rather than dynamic tools.
Yeah, they have to adapt.
The 50-30-20 rule is an incredible starting block for baseline wealth accumulation. It ensures you don't over-leverage your survival when you're starting out.
But the scaling problem is real.
It is. As your income rises, the absolute costs of your basic biological and societal needs does not scale proportionally. I mean, the calories required to keep you alive cost exactly the same whether you make $50,000 or $500,000.
So if a high-income earner is still allocating 50% to needs, they have artificially inflated their baseline.
Completely. They have bought way too much house, leased way too much car, and trapped themselves in a gilded cage.
They've categorized luxury as a baseline necessity. So how does the architecture shift when you hit that level of earning?
For aggressive wealth accumulation, the ratio must invert. The true wealth builders, the ones who achieve that mathematical financial freedom decades early, they often operate on something closer to a 20-20-60 rule.
Wow, 20-20-60.
Yes. Their income is so high and their baseline needs are so ruthlessly controlled that survival only consumes 20% of their net income.
So they might allocate another 20 to lifestyle and wants, which at a high income is still a substantial absolute dollar amount.
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
still living very well. but they are firing 60% of their income directly into the wealth-building engine. The architecture scales by expanding the surplus, not by expanding the baseline.
I think that is the exact trap people fall into. They get a raise, and instead of widening the gap between what they earn and what they need, they just immediately upgrade the need.
They move to the more expensive zip code the second the check clears.
Right. Now, assuming we have our ratio dialed in, we have to transition to the second pillar of construction, the defensive strategy.
Patching the holes in the ship.
Because you can have a 60% savings rate, but if the hull of your financial ship is compromised, you are going to sink regardless. This brings us to habit 3, the mechanics of debt and the absolute necessity of neutralizing toxic liabilities.
The terminology here is really critical. We must bifurcate debt into 2 distinct categories.
Toxic debt and structural debt.
Exactly. Toxic debt, primarily characterized by high-interest consumer credit cards and personal loans, is the single greatest destroyer of generational wealth. Full stop.
The math is incredibly unforgiving.
It is. When you carry a balance on a credit card at a 24% annual percentage rate, you are experiencing compound interest in reverse.
That's a terrifying way to put it. Compound interest in reverse.
There is no traditional investment vehicle on Earth that can reliably, safely yield 25% year over year to outpace that drain. You are fighting a losing battle.
Let's actually dwell on that math for a second, because I think people underestimate the gravity of 24% interest.
They really do. They just look at the minimum payment.
Right. But if you have $10,000 in the stock market returning a generous 10%, you make $1,000 over the year.
A great year.
But if you have $10,000 in credit card debt at 24%, it costs you $2,400.
Oh.
You are netting a negative $1,400 while thinking you are making progress on the investment side.
It is a gaping hole in the ship.
So what does this all mean? To use an analogy, high-interest credit card debt is a massive leak in the hull, while a low-interest mortgage is the sail pushing you forward. You cannot row fast enough to overcome that leak.
Precisely. Toxic debt represents a premium you are paying for the privilege of consuming your future income today.
It has to be eradicated before any serious offensive strategy can even begin.
However, and this is where the nuance is vital, structural debt is an entirely different animal.
Yeah.
A low-interest mortgage or a reasonably structured student loan is not inherently toxic.
Right. In fact, it can be a powerful tool for arbitrage.
Exactly.
Because if I lock in a mortgage at, say, 4 or 5%, I am securing leverage over an appreciating asset, which is the house.
Right. You're using the bank's money.
I could theoretically pay cash for the house if I had it, but why would I tie up $500,000 in brick and mortar just to save 5% in interest when I could deploy that $500,000 into the market and historically average 8 to 10%?
You've just defined the exact mechanism of positive leverage. You are borrowing money at a lower rate to earn a higher rate elsewhere.
And servicing that structural debt reliably is what builds your credit profile, which we will definitely discuss in the offensive strategy.
So the defensive posture isn't about being universally terrified of debt.
Right. It is about ruthlessly eliminating toxic debt while intelligently managing structural debt.
Exactly.
And once that toxic debt is cleared, the next defensive mechanism is habit 4, which is building the moat, automating your savings.
Paying yourself first.
Yeah. It's a cliche at this point, but the mechanical implementation is where people fail. The mandate is that emergency funds and retirement contributions must leave your account the exact moment your paycheck hits. It cannot be manual.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of automation. The necessity of it relies entirely on behavioral economics.
Because we just aren't wired to save naturally.
No, human beings suffer from a well-documented phenomenon known as decision fatigue. Every single day, you make thousands of micro decisions. By the end of the month, your willpower is just depleted.
So if you wait until the 30th of the month to manually transfer whatever is quote-unquote left over into your savings account,
You have to actively fight the urge to spend that money on immediate gratification, and you will almost always lose that fight.
by automating the process, you remove the friction entirely.
The money vanishes into your investment accounts or your emergency fund before your brain even registers it as available liquidity.
You naturally adapt your consumption to the artificially lowered balance in your checking account. It's essentially tricking your own psychology.
It is the most effective trick in the book.
But I want to explore a really specific defensive error that happens when people actually do automate, especially regarding workplace retirement plans.
Oh, this is a huge pitfall.
Let's say someone is diligently automating into their 401k, right? Capturing their employer match, which is essentially a 100% return on day one.
Free money. You always take the match.
Always. So they build up 100 grand in that account. Then a catastrophe hits, a massive medical bill, or a long-term job loss. I know people who look at that 401k balance and think, well, there is my emergency fund.
That is a catastrophic structural failure, and it happens all the time.
Why is it so dangerous?
Because people confuse net worth with liquidity. Tax-advantaged retirement accounts have strict rules. They are heavily fortified by the IRS for a reason. They are designed for decades of uninterrupted compound growth.
So they should never be used as your emergency fund.
Never. If you breach that fortress early to handle an emergency, the collateral damage is staggering. Not only do you trigger a taxable event, adding that withdrawal to your gross income for the year.
Which bumps your tax bracket.
Right. But the IRS also slaps you with a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of it.
So you could easily lose 30 or 40% of that money instantly to taxes and penalties just to access your own capital.
Exactly. But the invisible cost is even worse.
The opportunity cost.
Yes. By liquidating that capital, you are chopping down a compounding tree that you spent a decade growing. You lose all the future exponential growth that money would have generated over the next 30 years.
This is exactly why a proper defensive strategy requires a highly liquid, highly accessible emergency fund.
Usually housed in a high-yield savings account, completely distinct from your retirement assets.
The liquid emergency fund is the shock absorber that protects the compounding engine from being cannibalized during a crisis. Okay, so the defensive perimeter is locked.
The toxic debt is neutralized.
The automated liquidity moat is dug, and the structural debt is managed. Now we shift to Pillar 3, the offensive strategy.
Time to grow the wealth.
We transition from preserving capital to aggressively multiplying it. And the core engine of this phase is Habit 5, beginning your investment journey, specifically utilizing the rule of 15%.
The 15% rule is the bedrock of retirement math.
The metric we are looking at from the research suggests that investing 15% of your pre-tax income consistently from age 25 to age 67 will mathematically secure your retirement based on your current lifestyle.
The math behind that 42-year horizon is the purest demonstration of compound interest in existence.
I want to elevate the analogy here because people always say compound interest snowballs.
Right. Everyone uses the snowball analogy.
But a snowball implies linear physical accumulation. When we look at a 42-year timeline, compound interest acts much more like nuclear fission.
Fission. I like that.
In a reactor, one split atom releases energy that splits 2, which splits 4, which splits 8. It is exponential. In your portfolio, your initial principal generates a yield. Then that yield generates its own yield, and eventually you reach a point of critical mass.
Critical mass is the perfect terminology. In financial planning, we look for the crossover point.
What's the crossover point?
For the first decade of investing, the vast majority of your portfolio's growth comes from your manual contributions, the sweat equity of your labor. You are shoveling coal into the furnace.
Right.
But if you maintain that 15% contribution rate somewhere around year 15 or 20, the math inverts.
Oh, so the interest generated by the portfolio itself begins to exceed your annual contributions.
Exactly. By year 30, your contributions are practically rounding errors compared to the explosive exponential growth of the accumulated capital. The money is working significantly harder than you ever could.
But that entirely depends on the timeline. I mean, if we shrink that 42-year reactor down, say, someone doesn't start until they are 40.
And then the 15% rule completely shatters.
It shatters completely, doesn't it?
It does. The exponential curve of compound interest is heavily backloaded. The most explosive growth happens in the final 10 years of a 40-year horizon.
So if you cut out the first 15 years of compounding by starting at age 40...
You don't just lose 15 years of growth. You lose the massive exponential multiplication that would have occurred at the absolute end of the timeline.
To achieve the same final number starting at 40, you cannot just invest 15%. You might have to invest 30 or 40% of your income just to compensate for the lost time.
Time in the market is an irreplaceable variable in the equation.
So time is the ultimate offensive weapon. But there is a secondary offensive weapon that is massively overlooked, and that is Habit 6, monitoring and improving your credit score.
People don't think of their credit score as an offensive weapon, but it absolutely is.
We all understand the basic utility, right? A good credit score means a lower interest rate on a mortgage or a car loan. But what fascinates me is how your credit score acts as a hidden proxy for entirely unrelated financial costs.
This is a huge blind spot for most people.
Specifically, the fact that a poor credit score acts as a hidden massive tax on your insurance premiums, car insurance, life insurance, all of it.
This is a critical mechanism that most consumers are completely blind to. When you apply for auto insurance or life insurance, the underwriters are trying to assess risk.
Sure.
Historically, they relied on driving records and health histories. But the actuarial data revealed a profound statistical correlation. Individuals with poor credit histories are statistically much more likely to file insurance claims.
Wait, really? How does missing a credit card payment equate to getting into a car crash? That doesn't seem connected.
It isn't a direct causal link. It is a behavioral proxy. Actuaries have found that the psychological traits required to maintain a flawless credit score diligence, long-term planning, impulse control, attention to detail.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Those traits strongly correlate with risk-averse behavior in other areas of life, including driving safely and maintaining health.
Conversely, financial instability often correlates with stress, distraction, and deferred maintenance on vehicles, leading to higher claim rates.
Exactly. Because the statistical correlation is so strong, insurance companies use credit-based insurance scores to set your premiums.
That is mind-blowing. So if you are ignoring your credit score if you aren't actively monitoring it.
You are actively bleeding cash.
Yes. You aren't just risking a higher mortgage rate in the future. You are bleeding cash every single month on your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance, and your life insurance.
It is a silent drain on your offensive capabilities.
So the actionable step here for anyone listening is that you have to know what your score is and what's on your report. You are entitled to a free annual credit report from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
Just go to annualcreditreport.com. It's free and federally mandated.
Exactly. A maximized credit score is essentially a financial passport that grants you access to the lowest possible friction costs across the entire economic ecosystem.
That's a perfect way to frame it.
And speaking of friction costs, let's talk about the final offensive weapon, Habit 7, mastering negotiation.
The lost art of negotiation.
Truly. We live in a society governed by barcodes and online shopping carts. The sticker price feels absolute.
The cultural conditioning against negotiation in America is profound.
It is. The idea of haggling feels either archaic, like we are in some medieval bazaar, or incredibly uncomfortable and confrontational.
We view the transaction as a sterile, non-negotiable exchange. But from an economic standpoint, the sticker price is merely the opening offer.
Especially in service-based industries, bulk purchasing, or small business transactions.
Exactly. The profit margins are heavily padded to account for the exact fact that most consumers will simply accept the initial number without a fight.
I think people view negotiation as a zero-sum battle where you have to bully the other person to win, but it is really just an exercise in microeconomics.
It's just a conversation.
I compare negotiation to a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies, and you suffer a lifetime of premium pricing.
That's a great analogy.
But if you adopt a negotiator's mindset, it changes everyday transactions. You realize you can ask for a waiver on a massive medical bill. You can negotiate the interest rate on a credit card you've held for 10 years. You can negotiate the closing costs on a mortgage.
It is all about recognizing your leverage. If you have built the defensive and offensive architecture we've discussed, if you have liquid cash, zero toxic debt, and a stellar credit score,
You hold all the cards.
you have the ultimate leverage, which is the ability to walk away.
Right. When you call a service provider and ask for a retention discount, and they know you have the financial stability to instantly switch to a competitor, the entire power dynamic of the conversation shifts.
Flexing that negotiation muscle can easily retain tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime, capital that goes straight back into your compounding reactor.
So the offense is firing on all cylinders. We are maximizing our compounding timeline, leveraging our credit passport, and negotiating away friction costs.
Now, we reach the final phase of construction.
Pillar 4, the holistic ecosystem. Because wealth generation isn't just about spreadsheets floating in a void, it is heavily impacted by the physical, legal, and macroeconomic world around it.
The environment you build around yourself.
Exactly. The first element here, Habit 8, is ongoing financial education. And we aren't talking about reading generic finance blogs once a year.
No, we are talking about tracking macroeconomic shifts and tax code evolutions.
The necessity of this continuous education cannot be overstated. The architecture you build at age 30 will not operate perfectly in the economic climate that exists when you are 50.
Tax codes are rewritten, standard deductions fluctuate, capital gains brackets shift.
If you are entirely passive, you will be caught off guard by regulatory changes that can siphon massive amounts of wealth from your portfolio.
Similarly, understanding macroeconomic indicators like how inflation impacts the real return on cash or how interest rate hikes affect bond yields and real estate valuations.
It allows you to proactively adjust your portfolio rather than reacting in a panic when the market shifts.
It is the difference between navigating a ship and just floating on a raft and hoping the current takes you somewhere nice.
But let's be entirely realistic here. Keeping up with federal tax law changes, analyzing monetary policy, and managing a multi-asset portfolio, well, it becomes a full-time job.
It absolutely does.
At a certain point, the DIY approach hits a ceiling, which leads directly to habit 11, the necessity of seeking professional financial guidance.
Because when your net worth crosses certain thresholds, the complexity demands an architect.
But the financial advisory industry can feel incredibly opaque. How do you separate the actual professionals from the glorified salespeople?
This is where we must deeply analyze the regulatory framework, because it is the only shield the consumer has. The industry is highly stratified.
Break that down for us.
At the federal level, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, regulates large-scale investment advisory firms. The specific threshold from the text is that an advisor must register with the SEC if they manage over $110 million in client assets.
110 million. That is a massive number. It essentially means the SEC is primarily focused on systemic risk and massive institutional players.
Precisely. They are auditing the whales. However, if an advisory firm manages less than that $110 million mark, jurisdiction falls to state securities regulators.
Okay, but regardless of whether they answer to the SEC or the state, there's a fundamental tool every investor must use before handing over a single dollar.
FINRA Row Broker Check.
Let's explain what that actually exposes because it is incredibly powerful.
FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, maintains a public database. When you search an advisor, you aren't just looking at their shiny marketing material.
You are accessing their Form ADV.
Yes, this exposes their entire employment history, their exact certifications, and crucially, any regulatory actions, customer disputes, disciplinary events, or criminal disclosures.
It strips away the polished office and the expensive suit and shows you their literal track record of compliance.
Furthermore, it clarifies their legal standard of care.
This is the big one.
You must understand if they are operating under a fiduciary standard, meaning they are legally obligated to put your financial interests above their own.
Or merely a suitability standard, which allows them to sell you expensive, high-commission products as long as they are theoretically, quote-unquote, suitable for your profile.
It is the ultimate trust but verify mechanism. You wouldn't let a surgeon operate on you without checking their credentials and malpractice history.
Handing over your life savings requires the exact same level of scrutiny.
Absolutely.
Now, moving from the legal ecosystem to the physical ecosystem, habit 9. We have to talk about asset maintenance, and I'll be honest, this might be my favorite concept in the entire blueprint.
It's a very grounded concept.
It brilliantly connects macro wealth to mundane chores. Taking care of your real estate, your vehicles, and even your lawnmower is a foundational wealth strategy.
It is the economic principle of deferred maintenance. When we talk about real estate, for example, historical data and institutional projections consistently show reliable, long-term appreciation.
Right. For instance, the specific JP Morgan projection highlighted in the research noted that house prices were expected to increase by 3% in 2025.
A 3% annual increase on a $500,000 asset is a massive wealth generator. But that appreciation model assumes the asset remains structurally optimal.
Right. The housing market doesn't care about historical data if your roof is leaking and the foundation is cracked. Maintaining real estate safeguards this increasing value.
Exactly. If you defer a $500 preventative maintenance cost on an HVAC system and it results in a total system failure requiring a $10,000 replacement.
You haven't saved $500.
No, you have cannibalized your future equity. You are forced to liquidate compounding capital to fix a physical degradation that was entirely preventable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This concept scales all the way down to a lawnmower.
A simple lawnmower, yeah.
It sounds absurd to connect a push mower to generational wealth, but the mechanism is identical. If you fail to change the oil and clean the spark plug on a $300 piece of equipment, it seizes up.
And you have to buy a new one.
That is $300 that must be diverted away from your 20% investment bucket.
It's a leak in the budget.
If you had invested that $300 in a broad market index fund for 40 years at an 8% return, it would have grown to over $6,000.
So your failure to spend 10 minutes maintaining a spark plug literally cost your future self $6,000. Physical decay is a stealth tax on equity.
Which perfectly encapsulates the philosophy behind Habit 10, adopting a modest lifestyle.
Frugality and minimalism.
We need to reclaim the word frugality. In modern culture, frugality is often equated with deprivation, misery, and hoarding.
But in the context of wealth building, a modest mindset perfectly aligns with the 50-30-20 rule we discuss in Pillar 1. It's about distinguishing between needs and wants.
Frugality isn't about refusing to spend money. It is about refusing to waste it on things that don't yield joy or utility. It is an efficiency metric. Small adjustments drive big financial gains.
Exactly. When you adopt a modest lifestyle, you are systematically shrinking the denominator of your financial independence equation.
Lowering the bar for success.
Right. If you realize that a reliable 5-year-old vehicle provides the exact same utility as a brand new luxury SUV, you eliminate a massive monthly payment.
By intentionally limiting your desire for constant consumption, you artificially create a massive surplus in your cash flow.
And that surplus is the exact fuel required to accelerate your timeline to independence. You are essentially lowering the finish line while simultaneously running faster toward it.
It is a mathematical double whammy. The less you need to survive, the less capital you need to accumulate to become free.
It's powerful.
And that brings us to Habit 12. The final and arguably the most profound element of the entire holistic ecosystem, prioritizing personal well-being.
Physical health maintenance.
It is incredibly easy to compartmentalize our lives. We have our health in one box and our wealth in another.
We spend thousands of hours optimizing our asset allocation, obsessing over basis points, tracking compounding graphs.
While completely neglecting the biological machine required to actually experience that wealth, regular doctor and dentist visits thwart long-term issues.
The separation of health and wealth is the ultimate blind spot in financial planning. Let's look at the concept of sequence of returns risk.
Okay, what is that?
In finance, if the market crashes the year you retire, it severely damages your portfolio because you are withdrawing assets while they are depleted.
A terrible time to sell.
Right. A massive medical crisis acts as the exact same wealth-destroying shock, but it can happen at any time.
Healthcare inflation historically outpaces general economic inflation by a significant margin.
The cost of managing chronic, preventable diseases, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, severe dental decay, will absolutely devour a retirement portfolio faster than any bear market.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, health is literally wealth. A compromised physical state rapidly drains the financial nest egg you spent 40 years building.
We are talking about the ultimate ROI here. The cost of a premium electric toothbrush and a copay for a biannual dental cleaning is astronomically lower than the cost of a root canal, an implant, and the systemic infections related to periodontal disease.
The cost of a gym membership and quality nutrition is a fraction of the cost of long-term insulin dependency or cardiac bypass surgery.
It is the ultimate extension of the lawnmower analogy. Your physical body is your primary, irreplaceable asset.
It is the sole vehicle through which you will experience your financial freedom.
If you spend 40 years building a multi-million-dollar fortress, but you destroy your physical health in the process, the wealth is fundamentally useless.
You cannot buy back mobility and you cannot compound vitality.
Preventative medical maintenance is the greatest defensive financial strategy you can possibly deploy.
I think that completely redefines the landscape. We have traversed an incredible amount of architectural ground today. We moved past the idea of just hoping for wealth, and we laid out a literal schematic.
A real blueprint.
We started with the vision, establishing Habit 1 by overcoming our psychological disconnect by counting backward from our goals, and Habit 2, establishing a ruthless, scalable budget that avoids lifestyle creep.
Then we built a defense. Habit 3, neutralizing the mathematical impossibility of toxic credit card debt, and Habit 4, utilizing behavioral economics to automate a highly liquid moat that protects our compounding engines.
Then we launched the offense. Habit 5, understanding the staggering exponential power of the 15% rule over a 42-year compounding timeline. Habit 6, recognizing our credit score as a vital passport. And habit 7, flexing our negotiation muscle to optimize our capital.
And finally, we wrapped it all in a holistic ecosystem. Habit 8, ongoing financial education. Habit 11, verifying fiduciaries through regulatory databases. Habit 9, preventing the silent wealth drain of physical asset decay. Habit 10, embracing the efficiency of a modest baseline. And habit 12, relentlessly protecting our biological health as our primary asset.
It is a cohesive, impenetrable fortress when built correctly. And it brings us back to that empty dirt lot we started in. You now have the blueprint. The load-bearing walls are calculated, the foundation is poured. But blueprints don't build themselves.
No, they don't. You actually have to pick up the tools and execute the plan.
And that leaves us with one final, overarching philosophy to consider. We spend so much time in the financial world obsessing over the concept of return on investment, or ROI. We look at stock tickers, dividend yields, and real estate appreciation.
But the most profound takeaway from this entire architectural framework isn't about what you can aggressively acquire. It is about what you can successfully preserve.
What if the highest absolute ROI you will ever achieve in your lifetime doesn't come from picking the right index fund or the right brokerage account?
What if your greatest return comes from the hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt you avoided through a healthy lifestyle?
Or the massive replacement costs you avoided by simply maintaining your physical assets?
True. Generational wealth is rarely defined by how much capital you can temporarily capture. It is ultimately defined by how much of your life you can protect from decay.
Protecting your life from decay. That is the exact paradigm shift required to stop swinging blindly and start building something permanent. Thank you for joining us in the Architect's Office today.
It's been a great discussion.
If you found value in this blueprint, please like and subscribe to the Generational Wealth Project so you don't miss our future deep dives into the mechanics of independence. We are building this knowledge base together. Until next time, good luck out there on your financial journey, keep your blueprint on the table, and we will see you on the next deep dive.